The whole truth don finally come out. Make una come hear how Buhari take kpai for London. I know say you don hear say Buhari don kpai, but come hear how e take kpai for London. The full details, what you need to know is in this video you guys are seeing on this background. Make una just lis ten to the end so una go understand everything wey dey go on for this background here. But na the way this lawyer you guys are seeing in this video, Frank Tete, react to this particular update, and wetin he also talk at the ending of this video na it shock many Nigerians. This lawyer and this man you guys are seeing in this video make a lot of points for inside this video. Make una just lis ten, make una hear how they take react to this Buhari update, and make una also spread the video so that more Nigerians can still come across this video. So you guys enjoy the video and
unfortunately, we have to meet in these circumstances, but that's one of those things. But let me start with you, Dr. Amadi, because you worked with President Tinubu as the chairman, President Buhari as the chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. What do you remember of that time that you spent working with him?
Well, first, I think it was, my tenure kind of spilled over to his tenure for about 7 to 8 months. And what I remember clearly, first thing is that when he came in, the notion of body language. So everybody, there was some kind of mind reset that a guy who was going to be hard, perhaps on compliance, tough on crime, corruption, wasn't.
I remember everybody saying there's a new sheriff in town.
So I did an interview, and I made a point that winning election entitles to change policy. So I expected some perhaps radical change, in terms of knowing his pedigree, or at least what we assumed as a more of left of the center, or some would say extreme left kind of ideologue. So I thought perhaps that would change. Again, we initially, people were kind of led back, but my own surprise that maybe midstream it looked like they say things change, they remain the same. So I didn't quite see that really change. Again, we had a meeting with him, and in that meeting, he didn't quite speak, he didn't quite ask questions. We made presentations with the minister, with the PAMSEC, then Egali, and he listened to us and told us, thank you, and goodbye. So, not typical in terms of what a president who is taking briefing from people who look like. And much later, I heard from one of the ladies who was managing one of the parastatal that when she was being persecuted, I went to see her, to see him. He was so kind of concerned about corruption, but looked like somebody surrounded by very corrupt people, because the lady herself was strong on corruption. She was being persecuted, but it looked like he kind of wailed if he had people like this. So my sense is that he's probably somebody who knew the danger of corruption, but somehow not able, couldn't bring himself to deal with it. So he will still remain a controversial figure, a mythical one, if you like. But it looked like if he didn't become president in 2015, he probably would have died a legend. But now it's contested.
So to some extent, his legacy has been tarnished by his time.
Unraveled, and in my sense, kind of. Demythologized.
Right. Yep. Let me come to you, Frank Tietie, because I seem to remember you. I mean, obviously he was revered by his supporters, but then he was roundly criticized by the detractors, and I can't quite remember where you fall in. I seem to remember you being on the latter side of things.
I think Buhari had that messianic, personality, and there was a lot of hope and a lot of excitement in 2015. It was a fallen hope, because Nigerians were quite disappointed in the long run that cultic figure that he had, that commanded a certain number of votes at every of those many times that he attempted a shot at the presidency, turned out to be something that he became overwhelmed. He earned a reputation of being Baba Go Slow, because for 6 months he could hardly put together a cabinet. Nevertheless, because of the controversies that characterized his presidency, Nigerians would miss him. Nigerians would really wish that Buhari is alive to see, to compare and contrast with the person, the presidency of Bola Tinubu, who claimed that he made him president because he said, well, you couldn't be president with all of your 12 million votes that you garnered every election season. But I came around. So Buhari was well loved initially. And I think kudos to the base that supported him. They loved him even when he was faltering.
Was he loved or feared?
That cultic personality, that, you know, that cluster of persons that supported Buhari at all times, loved him.
Right.
That was mistaken. Buhari didn't quite exercise the figure, that nationalist figure, because he was very parochial in his mindset and quite simplistic about, you know, foreign policy. You know, and that's not peculiar to him. Previous presidents and heads of state have often done that. We haven't put Nigeria first in foreign policy many times. But Buhari, you know, because of his laid-back approach, there wasn't that kind of, you know, people had that settled, especially his ministers, had that kind of settled feeling, irrespective of whatever they did. Buhari was that kind of, you see, he was a loyalist to the core. When he loves you to the end. It doesn't matter how much of the criticism came from the media and from the detractors, particularly those from the PDP, whom he often dismissed. You know, Buhari got it a bit quite not too Nigerian when he viewed, you know, politics from the perspective 5% voted for me from a certain region, and then another region voted for me. So that nepotistic, you know, approach to politics or governance really affected his
Fairly narrow approach.
Yes, but to think that Buhari was a soldier, you know, and you can always give that credit to the Nigerian army or the Nigerian military, that they fought to put Nigeria together. So it should be taken for granted that these people loved Nigeria. But, you know, the idea is that we don't know how now, in comparison and in contrasting between the present and the past, whether or not Buhari's nepotistic, you know, policies or appointments, particularly, can will now fade in comparison with the with what we have at present. But nevertheless, for me personally, I love the man. The reason is that I quite had a shot at working for government because of his. He allowed me to get involved in one or two committees. Probably that won't happen, never happen in other governments because of the critical view I had of his own government. But in terms of human rights, I served in 2 human rights committees. You know, but I look back with to Buhari with a certain nostalgia, because, for example, look at what happened in the NSAS protest. Buhari resonated that kind of, you know, the opportunity for police reforms, which is something that is direly in need in this country. He set up committees. He gave them, you know, 100% free hand. He even endorsed whatever paper, you know, outcome reports that they brought in. But it's so sad that now this is Buhari passing on without all of those, you know, consolidated, you know, significant police reforms being seen. So but the
SARS he got rid of. So.
No.
And then I'm going to come to Sam.
But you know, as a matter of reality, that we haven't had significant police reforms. We still have a unitary police system that is ineffective, that still leaves, you know, governors on their knees in trying to, you know, give a sense of control in providing security. Right. So Buhari, for me, would have been a forever hero if one significant thing, and with regards to police reforms, and I think that really worried Nigerians was that he was a bit aloof. I mean, oftentimes when you heard of crisis, particularly the Agatu killings in Benue and a number of things, you say, but for goodness sake, I wasn't aware. So when you hear the likes of Garba Shehu and all of those close persons who work, those persons who work closely with him, you know, trying to justify, but Nigerians didn't really feel that personality or I experienced him in 1983 when he came in December, and all through 1984 we saw that tough stance, that tough guy personality, you know, that was often expressed through Brigadier Tunde Diagbon. So Nigerians thought they were going to see a whole lot, but all we got from Buhari was a number of excuses. He used the judges of the judges of the Supreme Court as scapegoats, and as the ones that prevented him from fighting corruption. But by and large, Buhari was a stable person, and I mean, you could give that to him.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Let me bring you in, Dr. Sam Madi, because Frank Tietie there was talking about the fact that he was aloof, and some people would go further to say he was quite austere in his sort of, you know, demeanor. So that made him a fairly unnatural politician, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And again, it's Buhari's success as a politician is theory of representation. So he kind of represented a class, the Talakawa. And again, he might be seen as sectional, but he spoke on behalf of a particular class or section of Nigerians and spoke courageously. You know, he embodied them in a sense. And if you look at his encounter, whether with former governor of, I think, Oyo, where he said, "Why are killing my people?" He was steadfast in pushing a narrative that, you know, represented the truth.
Yeah, but beyond that narrative,
Yep.
he didn't actually do that much for those people.
That is the subtlety of the theory that I believe that oftentimes populists end up using the people's imagination and energy to come to power and betray it. His policy, in fact, was in cartoon with neoliberalism, even without, you know, the sophistication and articulation of that. Because essentially, if you look at economic policy, you would expect that having come to power 12 million, 10 million of the poor, Buhari would have been decisive in kind of, you know, changing the landscape of public policy, doing some kind of income redistribution through policies. The policies of Buhari administration was not different from those of Obasanjo administration, only that they were more incompetently managed, okay? So clearly, that sense in which he betrayed both his mission, his representation, end of the day, the people were worse off. And that's perhaps something we want to watch for the Tinubus of this world, all those who come through populist uplift without identifying in reality. And Buhari is also a different person. When Ken Namani was senior president, he wanted to run with him. I had a meeting with Buba Galadima. They wanted me to convince Ken. I was wondering about how come I see the same people around him. I asked Buba that question. He said, well, they wanted to insulate him from being corrupted. So it looks like that narrowness in terms of, you know, relationship, network, perception, and, you know, lens seeing the world deeply affected capability to govern. And so, like Tete said, there's nothing Buhari finished well. Not because electoral reform, he started it, but he couldn't deliver a good election. That kind of inability to conceptualize and drive is a product, or was a product of a very endemic limitation.
So there's always an anticlimax with whatever it is he did.
Absolutely, because his worldview, his orientation, his perception and network and understanding were brutally limited. And that's why he could be a good person. He could be a nice Puritanist, saintly character, but essentially he was not fitted enough to govern a complex country in a complex world.
Right.
And so those who push for Buhari, that's why I said he could have remained a legend for his courage, for his saintliness, for no evident corruption in terms of, you know, the stories we hear. But his second coming, military rule, we can say he was, you know, the Sabaratra and the, you know, of power, of military, didn't quite allow for the substitution of policy. But here, he kind of demystified himself. And today, if you look at social media, people mourn because Nigeria head of state died and we're all mourning. But essentially, people are not saying, oh, how we miss the days of Buhari. And that's a lesson, really. Good man doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a leader. Nigeria should be able to think around the qualities of leadership. That a man could be very good, saintly, a human rights activist. He could perhaps do well as a fighter for justice, you know. But when you put people in leadership position, the complexity, the cognitive capability you need, the bandwidth to understand issues and follow through. That's what people say he's unaware. Maybe the archetypal depiction of that would be the picture where he had his toothpick and, you know, just seated. And people say, you know, not his fault. It basically couldn't perhaps grapple with the complexities and the sophistication of what's going on. But I think his heart was the right place, his mind was the right place for Nigeria, but unfortunately, he couldn't put them all together.
Right. Frank, I wonder whether you agree with that assessment, that he didn't have the tools, either intellectually or otherwise, to finish the job.
I think to a large extent I agree. First, it seemed as if Buhari was set after the ouster in 1985. Babangida's ouster in 1985, when the coup that took him out of power. It seemed as if he had just one desire, one life desire, and that was to come back and become the head of state of Nigeria.
And that was the end point of everything.
Yes, and it didn't matter. And that's why he tried so hard, and after 3 times, he had to weep on national television. He cried helplessly like a baby because the Nigerian system was too difficult for him to break. And with the military mentality, thinking that he could do all of that with with the figure that he had become, he lost hope. I guess he was going to remain very thankful to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for that, that kind of, I would say, the maestro's, hand that he brought into it. However, what happened is that Buhari became president, and the accusation remained in the build-up to the election that, look, we're talking about a man who always minds his own business. And it is after he left as military head of state, he didn't quite contribute so much to national development, even to developing himself in terms of having, some political sagacity in engagement. So he was very parochial in his, involvement in his interactions. That was a problem. And it also, and that's why I missed him. The reason is that he also left as president, and also, as he was building up to leave, he was giving a very stern warning: let nobody come to Dara and disturb me. I wasn't going to mind my business. So that's not
basically
too good.
I've had it with you.
Yes,
I've moved on.
Now compare with General Gowon. Right. General Gowon went back to school. Got a degree in political science, and then of course he didn't have much tools to engage the Nigerian people, and then he turned to prayer. But at least you could see a man who was, still yearning to correct some of the wrongs that he perhaps may have orchestrated when he was head of state. But President Buhari, in this case, just was minding his business. So again, it's so painful to think that Buhari really loved the poor. I can tell you that. How many presidents in the past decided that, look, if you got some loot from the Abacha, if you got some recoveries from the Abacha loot, you go share them to the poor. Now, you get the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, major credit to him for creating that kind of, fantastic ministry, which became a cesspit of corruption. And then where, you could have done some measure of direct cash transfer to people, but you see, large, cash of, wads of notes being stashed somewhere for the purpose of sharing 5,000 naira each to the poor. Look, this all defeated Buhari's good intention for his main base. Very painful. However, clearly, the man didn't really have the tools, and I think we need to compare. We've got a lot to learn from him. First, he has shown that it's possible for you to have a cult-like followership in this country. Peter Obi must study that, because he's near. That's
the second similarity.
yes, and he's near it. So he must study that and know how to manage it. Because how did Buhari sustain all of that? It didn't matter. The idea was say Baba, say Baba. Even though at a point in time, those who shouted say Baba became muffled in their tones because they didn't quite understand. Do not also forget that, however expedient it was for the subsidy to be removed, Buhari, because of the love for the poor and his inability to stomach the pains that will ensue the removal of subsidy, he couldn't have the courage to remove it.
Right.
And then he pushed it on to President Tinubu, even though we thought that President Tinubu could have done much to also borrow from President Buhari and then assuage the pains of the Nigerian
well, at least staggering.
Yes, but right. See, so Nigerians will now look back. Must we always go from back to worse and worse to worse to worst? Because now you look back and you see a very compassionate president who's gone, who's noble intentions for Nigerian poor. Those such intentions were bastardized by very, very nefarious and corrupt public officials that he didn't do much about. He refused to sack them, and that was a problem. You see, and that's something we must also look at as his personality. Was he so phlegmatic that he hardly, could be that, moved to a point where he could take, such strong actions?
Thank you for watching that video. So guys, before you leave, look at the top here. Do well to subscribe and also put on Kishobe so that whenever we upload any video in this great platform, you will be the first to see it. And please don't forget to drop your comment at the comment section, your opinion, what you think about this video. And please don't forget to share the video, spread the video so that more people can come across this video. See guys, this is where I'm going to end the video, and I will see you guys some other time.